Hey guys, welcome back to more Karen stories. In this video, an entitled Karen spit on a police officer and ends up in huge trouble. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the video. And the title story starts like this. So, since this does involve law enforcement, I will try to go into as much detail as possible. But forgive me in advance, since this whole thing was pretty crazy and I think my brain just shut off for some parts of it. I don't feel any shame in posting this though, and for my own sake I will still keep Karen's identity private, since I know how eager to bring someone to justice Reddit can be if someone's ID gets leaked. So first off, I don't really get involved with my neighborhood drama. Neither does my wife, and even though she's almost been dragged into some petty arguments about HOA and other stuff, we try to tune it out as much as possible, since we are just focused on keeping a steady schedule with our jobs so we can keep living in this neighborhood. We bought the house a couple years ago, even though it might not have been a super smart move financially. We really had to scrape together every penny we had to get into this neighborhood, since it has a pretty good reputation, especially with its crime rates and stuff. Before the event, I had never even heard police sirens around our street, which was a nice change from the city life that we escaped. I would not say it's the best house on the street, but I take pride in our house. There's a nice lawn my wife plants flowers on every spring, it is in a cozy spot of the cul-de-sac, and there's a nice 2-car garage attached to a long driveway that comes up the hill. The latter happens to be the subject of this story. After work one day, I came home to see that there was a car I'd never seen before parked in our driveway. Not only was it unfamiliar, but it was probably the worst attempt at parking I'd ever seen. I actually could not get my car into the garage because the parked car was so slanted it took up about half of both lanes. I tried to just be optimistic and assume it was a friend of my wife, but I was still pretty confused. I parked on the side of the road in front of my house and went inside. Upon asking my wife if she knew whose car it was, she said that she had no idea and that she had not seen anyone come to the house today, so it was not like it was just someone dropping something off. Luckily, we have a Ring doorbell, so I got to look through the footage and see who it was. Lo and behold, there was Karen getting out of her car about a couple hours ago and just abandoning her car to walk a couple of houses down. I knew who she was from my wife's ranting about the Facebook drama Karen would often try to start, but we had never talked before. She looked like the stereotypical Karen figure, a middle-aged white woman with blonde highlights and giant sunglasses, and there was no way I was getting into her business unless I had to. And well, in this case, I did. Later in the day, she finally came back to her car, and the doorbell camera alerted me in time for me to catch her before she left. I ran out the door and put a hand on the hood of her car, and she looked at me like I had made a dent in it or something. I politely explained as best as I could that, well, this was a driveway that was not hers, and therefore I was asking her to leave and not park here again. Sounds like a simple enough request, right? It was not like there was not a single other place she could park on the street, whether that be on the road or on someone else's yard. My leading theory is that she thought me and my wife were pushovers and would not do anything about it. She did not bother to roll down her window to talk to me. She could hear me, I could tell, but she definitely was not listening. With a smirking scoff, she backed out of the driveway and zoomed off. Definitely much faster than she should have been. I went back inside to tell my wife about it, and we both just had a good laugh about it. Meeting a Karen is like going to the zoo. Yeah, the animals are fun to look at, but you would never want to be in the enclosure with them, and they tend to have a very strict set of behaviors. Well, I came home the next day to find her car in the driveway again. I honestly just put my car in park and stared at it for a second. It felt like I was hallucinating, because there was no way someone would be petty enough to do this again when we just kicked her off our property yesterday. By now, I am fluent in explaining the rules when it comes to when and where people can park on private property, but at this point I was honestly questioning if I was somehow in the wrong and there was a huge detail I was missing or something. I hate that stupidest people here are the most confident, and well, that's usually the case, and this time I did not even want to talk to her. I was able to get my car past her and into the garage before I went inside, scribbled down a note that reminded her that she was on private property and that we were asking politely for her to leave, and then slid it under her windshield. I watched from inside for a few minutes, but I eventually decided that there was not much of a point. Just in case though, I took a few pictures of her car and wrote down the date. If I had learned anything from watching those Karen videos, it was that the only way you could really combat them was with plain evidence. Well, the note did nothing. Sure, there was a weird 2-day gap where we were left alone and me and my wife had a premature celebration, but once again I came home around midday the following Saturday, just to find that same damn car's sad attempt at parking in my driveway again. At this point I was done. I did not care if I had to get other people involved. I was not gonna be the neighborhood pushover. I knew Karen had other friends here, and how long would it take for her to spread the word that there was free parking with no consequences since the owner only made half-ass attempts to stop them? I waited on the porch for probably an hour. I took more pictures and checked every rule I could find while I was at it, and everything told me that she was just plain wrong. It felt good to be more confident in what I was doing, and eventually she showed up. She gave me weird looks as I stared her down while she walked over to her car, and froze when I walked over to her. I explained to her bluntly that if she parked there again, there were gonna be actual consequences. I did not care what the reason was, she would never be allowed to park here again. And, as you probably guessed, she could not have cared less. She of course explained something about how this was a neighborhood, and I guess for a minute she tried to make up some rules about how this was public property and that she lived nearby, so this was all fine. She then said how she just came to get something out of the car and that she would be gone in a few hours and I just needed to take a chill pill. I said I was towing her, I was not gonna give her the big spectacle she wanted, nor was I going to just let it go on her behalf. To make it clear that I was serious, I pulled out my phone and dialed a close-by towing company's number, and she heard the whole call. They said they would be there in an hour, with only a few questions asked. Karen looked like she was not buying it the entire time, but when I finished the call and confirmed they were coming, I saw that hope left her eyes with a blink. She started screaming literally out of nowhere, and I had to start recording for my own sake and told her to calm down. If she wanted, I told her she could just leave now and nothing would happen, but no, turns out that was way too complicated for her. Instead, she just continued to whine with occasional sudden screaming outbursts, shouting about how I was harassing her and that I needed to be stopped. I honestly started to feel like a celebrity. Again, I've seen videos that look pretty staged about these kinds of outbursts from fully grown women like Karen, but never did I actually think that someone who to my knowledge had no actual disorders could have such a cartoonish reaction to something as simple as this. It had to be her go-to way of getting what she wanted, so it made me all the happier to see her get upset when I refused to call the towers back. And then she pulled out her phone and called the police on me. She walked a few steps away, as if I was not gonna figure out what she was doing, but I could hear her entire call. She said that I was harassing her, threatening her, the whole ordeal. I actually started to get nervous when I realized she was making these threats to a real police officer, and I heard them say that they were on the way. Despite the fact that I was terrified, I told Karen pretty harshly about how messed up it was to fake an attack to cops. There was absolutely nothing she had to prove anything, and here she was acting like she had slipped away with no harm done. She did not respond and was instead trying to cry as much as possible before the cops showed up. Not once did I think she was genuinely crying, but well, a few minutes later a cop car showed up and 2 officers got out. Karen was quick to bombard them with questions and explanations about how horrible I was being and that they needed to take me away before I did anything worse. Fortunately, the cops took my story first. Since Karen had no evidence to show, I explained the situation, showed them the pictures and even gave them the Ring camera footage to show how many times this had happened and that she was clearly trespassing with no intention to stop. Karen tried sneaking in little comments about how all that mattered was her being assaulted, but neither of the cops bought it since they could watch the entire reaction from the doorbell. Slowly, Karen lost her innocent act and went silent. One of the officers went over to her and explained how if this happened again, she would be arrested for trespassing and told her that her call was inappropriate for the cops to be handling. She looked at me, looked at the cop, and without warning, she spat in his face. I had to cover my mouth as I watched the 2 cops immediately grab her and put her against the car, slapping handcuffs around her wrists. It felt like time was going so fast that I must have seen it wrong. They firmly explained that she was under arrest for disorderly conduct as well as assaulting an officer. She did not struggle against them, but God did her crying sound like she was being murdered. They got her in the car, made sure I was okay, apologized for her behavior, and then drove off. However, this was not the end yet for Karen. Did she really think she could get away with assaulting an officer and being such an entitled a-hole? And now we will read an update to the story that goes like this. So, seeing those police car lights fade down the street after they took Karen away was a huge relief. My wife came outside looking pale, but relieved too. We just stood there on the porch for a bit, kind of stunned. Spitting on a cop? It felt completely unreal, like something you see online, not something happening right on your doorstep in our normally quiet neighborhood. Watching the tow truck haul her badly parked car away a little later felt like the final necessary step. Justice was served quickly, but that feeling of it's over faded pretty fast. Real life, especially when cops and courts get involved, is not usually a neat ending. A couple days later, I got a call from the police department. They needed me to come down and give a formal statement about everything, from the first time she parked in the driveway right up to the spitting incident. They also wanted copies of the pictures I had taken and the Ring doorbell videos I had saved, so I went to the station. It felt weird being there, sitting across from a detective. I told him the whole story again, trying to get all the details right, dates, times, what was said, etc. He listened, took notes, and confirmed the charges against Karen. Trespassing, disorderly conduct, and the more serious one, assault on a police officer. He made it clear that spitting on an officer is a big deal, treat it as assault, and they don't mess around with that. He thanked me for the evidence, saying the videos were key. Leaving the station, I felt okay about it, but also kinda anxious. It was good that she was facing consequences, but now I was officially tangled up in a criminal case. Life tried to get back to normal, work, home stuff, trying to enjoy the house, but there was this background hum of unease. We heard through neighbors that Karen had bailed out pretty quick, just like the cops said might happen. Her husband apparently paid it. We did not see her near our house, which was good though. The arrest seemed to have at least scared her off our property, but she was not just gonna disappear quietly. A week or so after the arrest, my wife saw stuff popping up on the neighborhood Facebook group. Karen, or someone posting for her, started talking about being targeted and harassed over a parking misunderstanding. She played the victim, leaving out the part where she ignored requests, refused to leave private property, and, spat on a cop. Some people online offered sympathy, others who knew the real story pushed back. It got messy online for a bit. We decided not to engage directly, just saved screenshots in case they were needed. Fighting online would not help the actual legal case. A few weeks later, the prosecutor's office called. An assistant district attorney, ADA, was handling Karen's case and she wanted to meet. I went downtown to her office. She was all business, seemed sharp, and made it clear that she was taking the assault charge very seriously. So we went over my statement again, watched the Ring footage, and she explained the court process, plea deals, maybe a trial, and how I would be a witness. She told me Karen's lawyer was already trying to get the charges lessened, arguing it was just a moment of stress, but the ADA was not buying it. Spitting on an officer is not just disgusting, it is assault, she said flatly. It's a potential biohazard and an attack on someone doing their job. We prosecute these cases. Hearing that directly from her felt good. It felt like the system understood how serious Karen's actions were. The ADA mentioned Karen did not have a major criminal history, which could affect sentencing, but assaulting an officer meant jail time was a real possibility, even if not for years. And to be honest guys, we now have to make a jump in the story because OP was describing the court sequences in way too much detail and it was a little bit boring in my opinion, so we will jump over to the court scene where Karen is freaking out. So she cried, claimed she felt threatened by me, which contradicted the videos, and insisted the spitting was an accident, like a reflex because she was panicking. The prosecutor picked her story apart easily, highlighting the inconsistencies and how deliberate her actions looked on video. The so-called accidental spitting claim sounded completely unbelievable, and you could tell the jury was not buying it. The jury didn't take long, maybe 2 hours. They came back with the verdict: guilty. Guilty of trespassing, guilty of disorderly conduct, and guilty of assault on a police officer. I just felt this was a huge wave of relief. My wife grabbed my hand and Karen just stared ahead for a moment and then started crying. It looked like real tears this time. Sentencing was a few weeks later. The judge heard from the prosecutor, Karen's lawyer, who asked for leniency, pointing to a clean record, and let Karen speak. She gave a tearful apology that sounded like she was reading from a script and mostly talked about how this whole thing ruined her life. The judge did not seem moved. He talked about respecting property rights and then he focused on the assault. He called spitting on an officer a deplorable act and a serious assault, emphasizing that attacking law enforcement would not be tolerated. Then he delivered the sentence: several $1,000s in fines and 2 years of probation. Furthermore, mandatory anger management classes, a permanent restraining order, she couldn't contact us or come near our property ever again, and the part that really landed: 60 days in county jail. 60 days, not years, but for someone like Karen who acted like rules didn't apply to her, it was huge. Real jail time, and they took her into custody right there in the courtroom. Hearing her cry as the bailiff led her away was jarring, but it also felt like justice. Walking out of the courthouse that day felt final. The stress was not just lifted, it felt gone. We went home and the house finally felt completely peaceful again, like it was supposed to. It's been over a year now. Karen did her 60 days. From what we hear, the neighborhood grapevine still buzzes occasionally. It was not pleasant for her. She finished her probation requirements and paid the fines. She and her husband still live in the area, but she keeps a very low profile. The restraining order is in place and she has not caused any more trouble for us. Looking back, it was a nightmare dealing with the stress, the waiting, the court dates, but standing firm, documenting everything and seeing it through the legal system was the right call. We did not let her bully us, we trusted the process, told the truth, and eventually accountability happened. Seeing her face real consequences, especially jail time for assaulting that officer, brought the closure we needed. And the next one is titled, Am I the a-hole for telling my neighbor that I dated her husband? I, 33 female, became friendly with my neighbor, 37 female, let's call her Emily, after I helped her move a few boxes into our building while her husband, 35 male, was in the hospital. I did not meet Emily's husband until a few weeks later when she invited me over to dinner as thanks. When I arrived first, Emily's husband had run out to pick up some wine, but when he came back, I was shocked to see Matt, a guy I had gone on 3 dates with a year ago, before he suddenly ghosted me. He had a terrible poker face and tried to pretend like he did not recognize me. I don't play those games. I asked how long they'd been married and Emily said 3 years. And she recognized there was tension and asked if we knew each other. He said no, I said yes, and told Emily that I'd gone on dates with him a year ago. She became very upset and asked me to leave, which I did, and the next day Emily reached out and said that she didn't appreciate that I lied about when I dated her husband. He told her we had dated 4 years ago before they were married. I did not even live in the city 4 years ago, and even if we had dated 4 years ago, they had been engaged at that point. Either way, he would have been cheating. I sent her screenshots of our text from the year before and from Bumble of his profile, which was still active, and she never responded, but when I saw her in the lobby yesterday, she would not even look me in the eye. I don't know if they are still together, and Emily has not responded to my text, so am I the a-hole for telling her the truth? And yeah guys, let me know in the comments what you think here. Is OP the a-hole or not? A user in the comments said, you told her the info she did need to hear, now just let the pieces fall where they will. Do not engage any further. NTA, you were being honest, but it's best to leave her alone now. Mini update to the story, update, Emily just stopped by. We had a quick chat, but she let me know that she's kicked Matt out and she thanked me for telling the truth. She also found out that I was not the only person he dated while they were married, giving her space now but wanted to share an update. And now a final update. Over the last few days I've been hanging out with Emily along with her sister and 2 best friends who flew in to support her. Tuesday night she texted me, space is overrated, wine, and that was that. Matt confessed to everything and more, and it was a lot worse than anyone thought, but this is not about him anymore. We've all had some really good, sometimes difficult conversations, but it's all been very cathartic and surprisingly positive. I have found myself in the company of some pretty amazing women, which is why this situation has turned out the way it has. I moved to this city 2 years ago without knowing anyone. And it certainly was not an easy thing to tell someone that I had hoped would be a friend. To be honest, it kind of felt like word vomit in that moment. And when I first posted, I admittedly wanted validation because there was a large and loudly nagging part of me that thought I had done the wrong thing. So actually, I'm very grateful to have come through what began as a really awful situation with 4 awesome new friends and far more laughs than tears. Emily, her sister and I are now planning bi-weekly brunch dates, and we also discovered that we have some other friends and interests in common. This post got far more attention than I ever anticipated, so I did end up telling Emily about it. Her sister joked that we should start a podcast together, and we both shouted no, so this is both the end and a new beginning of this story. Thank you all for the support. And yeah guys, it's great to see a happy ending to this story, and I really didn't anticipate this when first reading the story, so I'm very glad that in the end OP actually formed new friendships and that this stupid guy is out of the picture. Never ever forgive a cheater. And before we end the video, we will read one last story from r/PattyRevenge. It is titled, If You Are Gonna Take My Parking Spot, Enjoy Your Extra Steps. So I got an assigned parking spot at my apartment complex. It is mine, clearly marked, no confusion. But there is this one guy that seems nice in previous conversations has parked a second time in my place. So here's what I did. I talked to him the first time and he actually apologized. Instead of talking to him a second time, I just parked directly behind him, not blocking him in completely, just close enough that he would have to do a very awkward 17-point turn to get out. It took him a solid 5 minutes to escape. I was having the time of my life watching him struggle from my window. And yeah guys, thank you for watching, please don't forget to subscribe and I will see you again tomorrow.